to work with the mayor. I'd be happy to go along a few days longer if the governor can, under the law, release enough to run them for a few days.
The magnanimous act of the good judge in agreeing to call the governor and ask the governor to release funds sufficient to keep these people paid and keep the program going while we are working hard at trying to restructure in the minimum possible amount of time, I think was the main objective of our coming together today, and I'm thoroughly delighted.
What will you do if the governor says he cannot release the funds only part of the time?
Then I'll try very hard to convince my good friend Judge Sterrett to ask the governor to release all of the funds then, and assure him that we'll keep working post-haste to get this restructuring done in the minimum possible amount of time.
I happen to know if Governor Smith has not been contacted, he will be, by a committee to attempt to get each state to fall in line with this bill. Some of the states have already been contacted. I don't know that Governor Smith has, but I feel that he has. We don't need this liberal law in Texas, especially in Dallas. We depend on our possession laws to get rid of our pushers. A lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to make buys on narcotic dealers. And to my knowledge, this is the only way that you can get a conviction in court on a pusher, is to make a buy from it.
And sometime in the office of District Attorney Henry Wade, in the office of Chief Dyson has been out here and spoken to the students. A number of trips I've made to Special Investigator Mr. Beilhardt, who were looking into the fact of Jasper Baccus having the buses taken out of the name of Fellowship Baptist Church Training School and put into the name of Dallas Dry Cleaning Training School, and that monster doesn't exist, only through Baccus.
My experience in life as a lawyer, as a judge, has always been one of obedience to the law, and not only obedience to the law, but of protections given people by the law. The basic purpose of a government, of a people, when they form a civil compact to form a government, is protection of each other, protection in their property, and protection in their personal lives first, then their possessions. And I have always supported actions that would protect people in their persons and their possessions. I have never countenanced actions that would be destructive of person or property. Anything that destroys property weakens all men. When a building is burned, everybody is poor. They've lost an edifice of service to mankind.
With just over a week to go and the heat really on between Democrats Ralph Yarborough and Lloyd Bentsen, George Bush has only begun his run for the money. All over the state, one sees Bentsen for senator signs. Senator Yarborough is spending less money for advertising, but he has personally been literally everywhere, shaking hands, reminding folks of what he's been doing in Washington. Yesterday, the senator appeared at Earth Day observances in both Dallas and Arlington. Now, George Bush is beginning the big push. Tonight he appears with his opponents on a live TV debate here in Amarillo. Tomorrow he's off on a whirlwind tour of North Texas. What are you going to be telling the people tomorrow as you go around the smaller towns here in the Panhandle?
Well, Jerry, I think we're going to be discussing the main issues in the Senate race, and that's, how did the Supreme Court thing? I've strongly disapproved of the turning down of the Carswell. I think we need balance on the court. We're talking about decentralized answers to the problems, revenue sharing to let the people in the Panhandle and across the state have some say in the answers to our problems. We're talking about fiscal sanity. Heavens, in the Panhandle, as in Dallas, people are tremendously concerned about this country living within its means. So it's a broad review of the issues in this Senate race.
A poll came out yesterday saying that Lloyd Bentsen is substantially ahead of Ralph Yarborough down in the valley. Does that surprise you?
Well, I don't know. I'll tell you, I'm kind of staying out of judging that other Senate race, and I'm concentrating on this one and concentrating on November and beating the Democrats. What we've got to do to change the direction of this country is to change party control of the United States Senate. If we don't, well, we're going to have the same committee chairman, the same leadership that is blocking the president's program as he tries to change the direction of the country. So I better focus on our race.
Mr. Nixon has said he's going to do everything he can to change that control, to try to get at least a half a dozen more Republican senators in Washington. Has he promised you any specific help when the race gets down to between you and somebody?
Well, I'll tell you this. He's told me on 3 different occasions that this is, in his view, one of the key races in the country. And I have no promise from him that it'll come to Texas, but let me make a prediction. If he campaigns in any state, he'll campaign in this state, and I know that the vice president, who's very popular in Texas, will be campaigning for me in Texas.
Our next stop is at live TV interview tonight here in Amarillo, then tomorrow around the Panhandle area with Mr. Bush and his entourage. Jerry Taff, Channel 8 News, with the Bush Campaign Party in Amarillo. Dr. Walker, either you're very optimistic about the financial condition of this country, or you have the bedside manner of a doctor telling his patient everything's going to be all right. Which is it?
Well, I think I'm both. I couldn't be telling the patient I think everything's going to be all right unless I was convinced that it's going to be all right. The unfortunate thing is that you cannot correct the bad impact of 4 years of inflation overnight. You have a period of hangover. You've got a period of adjustment. We're in that period. We're moving out of it, and if we're patient and persevere, I think that the American consumer is going to see things a lot better in the not-too-distant future. I plan to ask the governor if, under the law, that he can finance this program for 30 days. I think perhaps it would be good, but not to release the entire fund, because if he does, in my opinion, this will never be done. We've had a very, very simple way to cure this for the last 5 months, and we've had so much delay in action and so much blocking. But if the city doesn't want to resort to the proper way to cure it, then, of course, I'm ready to work with them any way that I can to get it cured.
I called in the FBI simply because $45,000 plus was moved from First National Bank to Jasper Baccus' personal business account. Or it was moved from the bank, I should say. There have been no complete report given of these funds.
Have you asked for another?
Yes. In fact, all of this that's going on, I insisted upon it.
A lot of people believe that we can restore the environment and whip pollution only by massive injections of federal spending, and a lot of the political back and forth is on whether we plan to spend enough money. Well, first of all, it's a partnership problem. We shouldn't expect the federal government to build all of the sewage treatment plants that are needed, and so we've set up a program which will result in $10 billion for this purpose, $4 billion federal, $6 billion state and local through an easy borrowing plan. Secondly, the federal government doesn't have to spend money to get people from doing things they shouldn't do. It can pass a law and put a businessman or another polluter in jail. Thirdly, we can use tax preferences and tax penalties. And finally, we can mobilize the business community to do the job, and good old-fashioned American know-how there, I think, will cure the environment much quicker than a massive federal spending program.
This is Borger, Texas, in the heart of the oil industrial complex of the Texas Panhandle. The people here are ruggedly independent and, frankly, more interested in petroleum than politics. But for today, at least, they've had their heads turned to senator talk. Lloyd Bentsen flew his big green DC3 in as one of half a dozen Panhandle points on his day's itinerary. He's aiming most of his attention at Ralph Yarborough. In fact, Bentsen said in Borger today that no claim is too wild for Yarborough to make. He'll say anything. But, said Bentsen, I don't think many people are listening to Ralph anymore. Republican George Bush is also whistle-stopping through the Panhandle. We invited him to ride with us in our car from Borger to his next stop, which is Pampa. On the way, we chatted about the underlying issues facing America today. What do you suspect is going to happen now as we get down into the final thing? We're hearing an awful lot of conversation about President Nixon and the moves he's going to make, to try to get more senators, more Republican senators in, and this sort of thing. Yeah. What is the real situation going to develop over the Supreme Court? How is that going to finally...
Well, I think that the president, first of all, I think it's fair to assume, and I've talked to him on several different occasions, that the president is vitally and keenly interested, one, in this Senate race in Texas, and two, in getting control of the United States Senate. His programs, such as bringing balance to the Supreme Court, are being blocked by a hostile Senate. And so I would say using the Supreme Court, the demise of Carswell and Haynesworth as a focal point, that the president feels that he has got to get people in the Senate that favor the court having a limited role, having the role of interpretation and construction rather than legislation. So much of what the Senate race in Texas in the fall is going to be about is party support to get the committees in control of people who will hopefully support the president on this kind of decentralized, this kind of Texas, if you will, move.